Go.
Good evening. Welcome to the July 29th school committee meeting. First, I'd like to have a roll call vote of the committee. Aaron?
Here.
Carla?
Here.
Tom?
Here.
John?
Here.
Sean?
Here.
And Chuck Robinson is here. And just the staff that's joining us is Dr. Doherty, Chris Kelly, Assistant Superintendent Chris Kelly, Student Services, Jen Stiles, CFO Gail Dowd, and Human Resources, Jennifer Allard. I got everybody correct, John?
Yes.
So tonight, we'll again, with our public input for items not on the agenda, we'll use the email schoolcommittee@reading.k12.ma.us. We can also receive questions on the agenda items. While that's going on, we'll monitor that and try and answer those at the time we're following when we answer committee questions. So tonight we'll have consent agenda reports, and then the major focus of the meeting is the fall opening process presented by Dr. Doherty and staff, and following that we'll have an update on the superintendent's search process. So I think I got everything. So first item on the agenda is the consent agenda. Is there a motion?
I move to approve the consent agenda.
Second.
Seconded by Sean. Does anyone have any questions on it or comments, changes? Okay, seeing none, we'll have a roll call vote. Aaron?
Aye.
Carla?
Aye.
Tom?
Aye.
John?
Aye.
Sean?
Aye.
And Chuck, aye. Thank you. So now we'll have reports. I didn't know whether there were any staff reports or whether that's tied to the presentation.
No staff
Okay,
reports.
so there's no staff reports, so we'll go right to committee. Aaron, do you have any reports?
I do not have any reports tonight.
Carla?
Thank you, Chuck. I do have two reports. The audit committee met on July 16th to talk about RMLD for 2019 calendar year. And we were supposed to meet tonight, but Sean and I are here, so we won't be attending that meeting. We also had a RCTV board meeting on the 21st. They are still, they are running camps for the first 3 weeks in August. They're half-day sessions and they still have availability if anybody is interested. They live streamed graduation this past Sunday, which was a fabulous event. I'm sure we'll get to that. And they will be looking to live stream our meetings on YouTube, more so than Facebook, because it's not as equipped to handle such long meetings. And that's it.
Right. I just have a question, Carla. When you said the audit committee, is that just reviewing the RMLD audit, or is there something else?
The RMLD audit was on the 21st. Today's agenda was, Sean, can you back me up on it? Today's agenda for RMLD?
Today's agenda was the town audit.
Okay, so it's housekeeping type stuff. Okay, Tom?
I have no reports today, Chuck.
Sean, I can see you.
Yeah, I'm here. The Ad hoc Human Rights Committee continues to meet every couple weeks or so. The focus for the last 2 meetings and for the upcoming meeting has been on nailing down some of the details around the proposed staff position and the advisory board that would or network that would support that position, made up of stakeholders from around town. The next meeting for that is scheduled the week, or well, it's not scheduled yet, but we are working on scheduling the next meeting for that the week of the 17th. And the hope is to have Amy Lannon from the library attending that one to nail down some of the final outstanding questions before the proposal can be somewhat close to wrapped up.
Great, thank you. John?
No reports, Chuck.
Okay, so I know it's been a lot of good comments and posts by the committee and others about the graduation, but again, I'd just like to, shout out to Principal Boynton as just a nice thing to do for kids, and as I said to a few people leaving, I mean, it was different, obviously, but a lot of the substance of what graduation was at that event. So I thought it was just a well run, and I know a lot of work went into it. So thank you to her. So, okay, Dr. Doherty, we're ready to go right into the presentation. So just one thing I wanted to say beforehand is, we're a policy board, so there's certainly our ability to ask clarifying questions and whatnot, but I'd hope that we don't get down into the weeds on certain decisions that are being made, and just let the staff do that and present that, and keep ourselves at a policy level the best we can. So I thank you everybody for that.
Thank you, Mr. Roth. What I'd like to do this evening, and it looks like I'm able to pull up the Google Doc. Assuming everyone can see this?
Yep.
Yes, yes.
Okay, great.
Yes.
That way I don't have to use the slides for the survey results because it's not as clean with the way the Google survey works. But before I get into the survey, I want to just give a little context as to the work that's been going on. So we've been obviously working on this since May on what the fall is going to look like, and along the way we've been receiving bits and pieces of guidance from the Department of Elementary and Secondary Education. It seems also sometimes that the guidance changes, and so what we have been trying to do is put together the 3 plans that the state has asked us to put together. One that was an in-person model, one that was a hybrid model, and a hybrid model is defined as half of the time students are in person in the building and half of the time they are remote. And I'll go into more detail on that. And then the third plan is a remote learning plan. And the whole basis behind this is that by having all 3 plans ready to go at different points during the school year, we may be using these plans and going back and forth between the different plans, depending on the conditions that are happening in our Commonwealth and in our region. I mean, right now, thankfully, the infection rate in Massachusetts is low, but as we have seen in other parts of the country, that can change very quickly. So what I want to do this evening is a couple of things. One is I want to walk you through the feasibility study piece, which includes the survey results, which includes some of the other work that we have done to come up with the conclusions and the plans that we have come up with. That's the first part. And then I want to go into detail with the 3 plans. Talk about the advantages and disadvantages of each plan. And then to conclude, I'll briefly go over some other things that aren't necessarily related to the plans, but are definitely related to the fall reopening. The deadlines that we have in front of us this Friday, I am required to submit preliminary plans to DESE. Then we're supposed to be getting some feedback from them early next week, so it's supposed to be a quick turnaround. And then August 10th, I have to submit the final comprehensive plans. The final comprehensive plans do have to get approved by the school committee, and the current date is for that is August 6th. In addition, we have been gathering lots of feedback. The surveys that you see that you will be seeing the results of tonight is one example. This is the second round of surveys that we've done this summer. We've also been holding staff feedback sessions that have been well attended. We've had 2 so far. We're having a third tomorrow. I've had over 100 at each of them. In addition, we have had community community feedback that's been going on. And we've had 3 of those, and the 4th one is tomorrow. In addition, I have had over 55 office hours with both families and with staff individually. And those have also been very productive. So those are the things that have been informing our decisions as we continue to move forward. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to go over the family survey results first. And you can see here that there was 1,887 responses, which is a little bit less than the first survey that we sent out, but still a pretty good representation of families in the school district. So the first question we asked is, what schools will your children attend in the 2020-2021 school year? You can see it pretty much follows the sizes of the schools in terms of response rates. So it's a very good cross-section of response rates for our families. The second question that was asked, if all proper health and safety precautions are taken and school would reopen with an in-person model where all students would be returning to school full-time, what is your current plan for your children for the 2020-2021 school year? The reason why we asked this question is that we knew that there was going to be a cross-section of families that were going to take advantage of the fully remote model, which we do need to offer for any of the models that we're going to be implementing. So you can see here that 83.9% of the children would be attending in person, 15.6%, which is 294 right now, children, would be attending remotely, and then a very small group, can't even get it to show up on the screen, it's so small, but it's a very small percentage that would be homeschooled. And in order to be homeschooled, you would have to submit a homeschool plan to Chris Kelly, and that would have to be approved by her and the building principals. It is not an option that we would be providing any curriculum material or support or anything like that. So that it would be a completely different option. But we also wanted to know if anyone was going to implement that option. It looks like 0.5%. Thank you. The third question, we asked if all proper health and safety precautions are taken and school were to reopen with a hybrid model, where students would be placed into one of the cohort models, A or B. And cohorts, by the way, are 2 different groups that would be meeting on opposite weeks. And cohorts would be alternate days or weeks where they are in person or remote. Which choice below would you make for your children for the 2020-21 school year? And we did use the caveat that there may be some students that are going to be full-time, be in person full-time for this model based on need. So you can see here that the number increases with the hybrid model that we have now. 90% of the children would be following the hybrid model, which is 1,698 of the respondents. 9% or 170 children would be attending remotely. And then again, about 19 students would be homeschooled, 1%. This is where it gets a little tricky with the Google Docs, but I'll make sure that we spend a little bit of time on this. So the next question we asked is we wanted to see what degree of concern did families have for each of the following areas, to see what were the major areas that they felt we needed to address, or that they felt they needed more information on. And so this one here, and so it just so you know, the blue is no concern, the red is very little concern, the orange some concern, the green moderate concern, and the purple is significant concern. So this first column, my children have a pre-existing health condition, and I'm concerned that he or she may contract the virus. Most people do not have a concern, and it tends to go downward, where there is a significant concern about 89 families. The second one, my children live with someone at home that has a health condition. I'm concerned that he or she will get infected and pass along the virus. Again, most respondents had no concern, and again, it went downward. The ones we did have 214 families that did have a significant concern with that. The next one was heat and humidity. So in heat and humidity, you could see it's kind of flat. There were about 500 that did have some concern, and there were 404 that had significant concern. 290 had moderate concern. Ventilation of classrooms. You could see it was kind of a steady increase, where we had a little over 600 that had some concern with that. This one was cleaning and disinfecting of classrooms. And again, it's kind of steady. The significant concern was 476, ranging with the no concern was 260. Trying to learn with a mask on ranged from 377, 446, 457, 296, 312. Staff and students following the health and safety guidelines. Again, it went from 271, 403, 444, 328, and 441. Trying to learn with proper, hold on a second. Trying to learn with proper physical distancing. As you can see, it was pretty steady in the numbers: 369, 418, 430, 317, 353. And having hand sanitizer available actually went downward, which is a good sign. How lunch is going to work. Again, we had various degrees: 437, 417, 457, 282, and 294. And let's see, what's this one? How recess and physical education would work: 430, 396, 444, 292, 325. And then the last one was athletics and extracurricular activities: 494, 390, 399, 295, and 309. So that was one of the longer ones. Then we asked a few other questions about the different plans. This question asked about, with the different plans, which model or modification would they prefer? 57.2% wanted the Palo Alto model, which was the 2 days on, 1 remote day, and then 2 days off model in person. And then we had no preference of 15.6 and 27.2 for 1 week in person, 1 week remote. We also asked a question about would they prefer to be in the same cohort if we were going with a hybrid model, or in different cohorts. So you could see that we had 55.1% wanted their children in the same cohort, and looks like 4.2% would prefer to have their children in different cohort schedules. We also asked the question about transportation. Obviously, transportation is going to be a challenge this year. So we wanted to assess if students did qualify for transportation, whether it be special ed or the regular bus transportation, would they access it? 3.7% said they would, and 6.5% of this said they would not. Everyone else would not qualify for transportation. We also asked about technology needs. 82.1% said that they would not have any additional technology needs. 17% said that they would need access to a computer only because they have internet. 17% would need access to a computer only. Oh no, sorry, wrong one. 9% would need both internet access and access to a computer. And trying to get that last little one, very small, 8.4% would need internet access only because they have a computer. You also asked about breakfast and lunch. And out of the families, the respondents, 49 said maybe, and 45 said yes. Out of the group, so that's about 94 looks like, and actually pretty consistent to what we're serving right now, which is over 100, just about 120, I believe. So that's the family survey. I guess I can take some questions on this if you want me to now, Mr. Robinson.
Sure. Does the committee have any questions? Aaron?
Hi. There was a high response for the Palo Alto. Am I saying that right? Was it Palo Alto based on the city model, which was the 2 days a week?
Yeah.
Does that influence at all how you want to look at the hybrid model?
The decision to go with the week on, week off was more based on the science than the preference.
So them having 10 days away from the school building.
Correct, and it gives us the opportunity on Fridays and then having Saturday and Sunday. The 72 hours is also a way to minimize the touch surfaces on the viruses. So it really was a pure science, cleaning, health reason to do that. There was also a lot of support on the different committees having continuity of 4 days in a row of in-person. A lot of staff felt educationally that was a better model than trying to have a disjointed 2-1-2. And Wednesdays would be very difficult to try to do some sort of cleaning and then have it. The 72 hours wouldn't be in effect.
Gotcha.
We
Okay.
we looked at all kinds of data to come up with the different models that we were presenting. I know that people did prefer the Palo Alto a little bit more than the 1 week on, 1 week off, but we felt that looking at the science piece was more of a safety reason, and that superseded it.
That makes sense.
John, on the question regarding heat and humidity, did the survey give a sense as to where those responses were coming from? Was it more towards the high school or all the schools, or we don't know that?
I actually haven't drilled down that far yet. My guess is that it's all the buildings. There are different spots in every building that are hotter than others.
Okay.
And, usually the first couple of weeks in September and obviously June is.
Thank you.
Yep.
Any other questions? Okay, I guess we're ready to move on.
I'm going to go to the staff survey.
Okay.
So the staff survey, we had 530 responses. We broke it down to all the different staff. And you can see that, again, it's broken down primarily by the populations that we have for each of the areas. Our largest group is the teachers, both general education and preschool special ed related service providers, school nurse, followed by paraeducators, and then the other different groups of food service custodians, secretaries, administrators, technicians.
So I'm sorry, which bucket do the specialists fall in? The general educators?
Yes.
Okay.
What school do you primarily work in? Again, it's broken down pretty well by the populations in each of the schools, with the high school being the largest number of respondents, followed by the two middle schools. Although Birch Meadow and Killam also had larger responses. So breaking this down, again, asking similar questions. Same scale of 1 to 5, where 1 is no concern, all the way to 5 being significant concern. So I'll go through these one at a time. I have a pre-existing health condition. I am concerned that I will contract the virus. You can see that blue is the largest. We do have, though, a population of staff that do have a pre-existing health condition. The second one is I live with someone at home that has a health condition, and I'm concerned that I will get infected and pass it along to them. Again, we do have a large number that had no concern, but we do have, again, a significant number that have someone at home with a health condition. The next one is heat and humidity. And you can see that that's a rising increase, and obviously this is a concern, as evidenced by the letters that the school committee has been receiving. Ventilation is similar. Cleaning and disinfecting, again, a similar increase. This one here is trying to perform my role with a mask on. Again, it's an increase in concern. Staff and students following the health and safety guidelines. Again, you see the increasing concern. Trying to perform my role with the proper physical distancing. Similar. Having hand sanitizer available. Pretty flat response across the board. and how lunch is going to work. Less of an incline, but still increasing incline. We also asked how they feel about returning. So this question, if you're, this was for teachers and related service providers and nurses. If the buildings reopen in the fall with the appropriate health and safety measures applied, what best describes how you currently feel about returning? So the largest one was, oh, I'm not in this role. The next one, I can return, but prefer to work remotely to limit my risk and can productively continue my work without coming into the building. 10.9% said I can return and I'm not nervous as I know that the administration will take every precaution to keep me safe. I can return, but I'm nervous about being safe with the 3-foot physical distancing versus the 6-foot. You can see 4.7%. I cannot return to work because I need to arrange for childcare, and I cannot return to work as I'm in a high-risk category. And then there is a very small percentage that says I will likely resign or retire. I don't even think it's, oh yeah, here it is. It's a very small number, 0.6%. We also asked the same question for paraeducators and tutors. So the bulk of the people that were not in this role, but then we had varying degrees. One group said 29 said I can return but prefer to work remotely. I can return but prefer. Oh, nope, sorry, wrong one. I can return and I'm not nervous as I know the administration will take care of every precaution. That's 8.1%. I can return, but I'm nervous about being safe with the 3-foot physical distancing. I cannot return to work as I'm in a high-risk category. And the last one, I'm not in, nope, not that one. Oh, that's the one there. Okay. So that was for paraeducators. We also asked similar questions for custodians, technicians, secretaries, very small percentages in these areas. The blue is that they were not in the role. Food service, very small sliver of respondents because it is a smaller group. Actually, only one person answered it from food service. And then we asked the same question for administrators and directors. I think someone raised their hand, Chuck. John Parks.
John,
John, I'm not in this role for 2020, 2021 due to them not receiving assignments as of yet, because that seems to be a staggering number for
No. The question is geared for a particular population. So each one says this question is for administrators and directors.
Okay.
Or in order, yeah. So
I read it wrong then. That's my fault.
Okay. So then we asked the question about the hybrid plans. And so we asked teachers and we asked paraeducators because those would be the two groups that would be most impacted by having a hybrid model. Because all of the other employees would be there all the time in person. So after you remove the 30.9%, 62 had no preference, 135 were the 1 week on, 1 week off, and 169 were the Palo Alto model. So a little bit more evenly split than the families survey. We did the same with paraeducators. 39 no preference, 38 1 week in person, 1 week remote, 48 Palo Alto. And then, so that's the staff survey. I don't know if you had any.
any other questions? Aaron?
Hi. So that seems to be a large number of teachers that said either they have a pre-existing health condition or they live with someone who has a pre-existing health condition. And if I'm not mistaken, that would be an allowance for somebody to teach fully remotely. Is that correct?
No, only the ones with the pre-existing health condition.
So it's not, if they have someone in their home with a condition, that's not an allowance?
Yes, it would have to be, it would have to be further defined.
Okay.
We didn't ask, we kept it pretty general. So we would need to drill down further. It would have to be on an individual by individual basis.
Okay, but even if some
And-
of them
we
qualify,
don't-
we're talking about a lot of teachers.
That was all staff. That wasn't just teachers.
Okay,
But you're right, it would be a large amount, yes.
okay. Are you factoring that into the potential hybrid model, like not having that many staff members?
Until we know exactly who we're talking about, I really can't, you know, do anything about it. I have to know first how many students are going to be remote completely and how many staff are going to be potentially, because of health conditions, remote.
Okay. At what point are we nailing that down?
As soon as you approve a plan next Thursday.
So we're not asking that until we approve a plan? Because
I
we
can't,
might be
because
approving a plan we can't do.
they don't know the plan, so they're not going to commit.
Okay, but we could also approve a plan that then can't happen, correct?
No, we would have to try to see how the model would work. But that's more the operations piece that
Okay.
we would have to look at.
Okay. Okay, thanks for clarifying.
Thanks, Aaron. John?
Dr. Dory, were these done prior to that South Korean study being released, or was this after the fact?
I think it happened at the same time.
Okay.
I
Do
think
we
the
have a-
survey came out the same day that the study came out.
Okay, so some of this may have been prior to staff seeing that survey?
It's
Right,
possible.
That study,
Yeah,
okay.
it's possible.
Because that's changed a lot of people's minds in my estimation. Knowing that view of the 10 to 19-year-olds can now pass it
Yes.
to some level, I think may change those results. Are we doing another survey of staff prior to?
Yeah,
like
there'll be a more staff-specific survey going for individuals. Will need to reach out to us. We've already sent something out if staff had pre-existing health conditions. So we're already working on that group, and we're going through that on a case-by-case basis right now, counseling, coaching them. So that group we're already working with.
Okay, thank you.
But there's so many other different leaves that, you know, those are the ones we haven't started looking at yet. Part of the challenge too, particularly the ones with the childcare, is that a lot of school districts have not unveiled their plans yet, and they may be living in those school districts. So that could be a factor.
Can someone elaborate just in 2 cents, you know, what is the South Korean? I missed that one.
So the South Korean study came out, I think, about 2 weeks ago, maybe 3 now. And they said that children that are 10 years and older now can transmit, that what the study is showing, that children 10 years and older can transmit the virus as much as adults can. So essentially that's 5th grade, 6th grade.
So we're gonna listen to South Korea now, or?
It's another research study that's out there. I mean, there's a lot of research studies out there.
Okay.
That one's got a large population in the study too. It's over 50,000 people in that study.
Any other questions? Carla?
Hi, thanks, Dr. Doherty. I actually don't have a question. I wanted to thank you for all the work that you and the staff have done. Having the community sessions, I've listened in on one of the community sessions, and I think parents and I'm sure staff really appreciate the transparency and your willingness to listen. And I commend you for listening to the teachers on the changing from a 3-day to a 3 foot to 6 foot distancing. So thank you.
You're welcome. It's really, I can't emphasize how much this has been a team effort. It's a lot of moving parts, but thank you. So I'm going to move now to the PowerPoint, Chuck. Is that okay?
Yes.
All right. Can everyone see the PowerPoint?
No, we still got your web.
Not yet.
Okay. All right. Let me try this again. How about that?
Yes.
Okay. So I'm going to go through some of these. These are the ones I've already done. Okay, so I'm going to go through the feasibility study. A lot of this is in the document that was released this weekend. And so in this part I already did. So, okay, so the highlights of the feasibility study is, so we, as Mrs. Dowd presented in a previous school committee meeting, we've been ordering significant amount of PPE and continue to. We went through our ESY program, continue to go through our ESY program, and we found some things out in that program that also allowed us to purchase different types of PPE. We've purchased additional online curriculum and video conferencing tools and additional technology devices. The goal by purchasing the additional technology devices in the hotspots and the cameras is to be as fully prepared as possible for both in-person and remote and hybrid learning this upcoming school year. The Town of Reading Facilities Department, they did a review of all of the learning spaces, the cafeteria spaces in our school districts, and they used the 3 foot minimum, and we did certainly that on purpose to see what would be the capacity using the American Physicians Association, I believe, model in the DESE guidelines of the 3 foot minimum. What we found, and this is more of a general statement, because we have classrooms of all different shapes and sizes in the district, that on average, if you took out all the furniture except for 22 student desks and chairs, and a teacher desk and 1 table, we would be able to hold 22 students and 1 teacher in a typical size classroom of 800 square feet. Now, at some levels, instead of desks, you have tables, so that obviously is going to alter the capacity of that classroom. But that would be if we took everything out except for that furniture that I just mentioned. It would also, the student capacity is also going to change depending on the size of the classroom, the class layout, the removal of excess furniture. We have a lot of bookcases and cabinets in those classrooms, so those would all need to be taken out. Now, that also creates a problem because teachers rely on and students rely on the learning materials that are in the classroom, so that means you can't necessarily take everything out to get to that 22 for a typical 800. If we were to go from a 3 foot distancing to a 6 foot distancing requirement, Now that changes to about a 14 student capacity for an average size classroom. Obviously, our special education learning centers, testing areas, counseling rooms would be much different setup and capacity. In terms of class sizes, our class sizes range from 14 or 15 at the Rise Preschool and Wood End Kindergarten, although I do believe those numbers have now increased, to a high at the elementary of 25. The Wood End 4th and 5th grade are at that level. I will also say Wood End has the smallest classrooms in the elementary level by average. Also, we have to take into account that there will be more adults in our elementary classrooms and our special education co-taught classrooms across the district. We also, at the middle school level, of class sizes ranging from 19 to 26. Ironically, the higher class sizes are in grade 6 in both schools. I will say that Parker Middle School has smaller classrooms in square footage than Coolidge Middle School. And then at the high school, depending on the class and the level, the class sizes are ranging from 18 to 32. So some of your honors and AP classes are at the higher end of that range. And again, there are adults in the co-taught classrooms and additional support, and that would impact the capacity. We would need, for those higher classroom areas, we would need overflow spaces. We would not be able to provide all the overflow spaces necessary in most schools. So we would have to seek outside of the school district additional classroom spaces. Now, classroom spaces just don't exist. You would have to retrofit them for the safety needs, follow the fire inspections and building inspector and all of those codes that we would need to make sure that we're up to speed on. We also do have some large spaces in our schools, which we would access if we need to. The library, the cafeteria, the gymnasium, the multi-purpose room and auditoriums are at the secondary level. I will tell you, and you'll see in the report that we are going to be using the cafeteria and the gymnasium for lunches. So those areas would not be available in the middle of the day during lunchtime. We would also need additional staffing for those off-site classrooms, more than what we would need for any other level. So this would be above and beyond what we currently have for staffing levels. And then to complicate it a little bit more, we have the Birch Meadow Elementary School, which right now is down the 3 modular classrooms, and they were already very tight for space. So they're already in a difficult challenge, and we've been working closely with Mrs. Hendricks on that. And then finally, we would need a location or storage trailers for additional furniture, because we will have to put that extra furniture that are in those classrooms somewhere else. We will need storage in the hybrid model, but not at the same level as we would with the 3-foot in-person model. So those would be all added expenses. And the storage we would need to get would be storage that we could easily access. It can't be what is called cold storage, where you just put it in there and then access it when everything, goes back to in-person. There's obviously going to be times where we're going to need to go in and lunch is going to be a little bit of a challenge. As I mentioned, we have to have a 6-foot physical distancing with lunch. So we would be taking a look at, we've been working closely with Danielle Collins and coming up with a plan on what that would look like. And we feel we do have a good plan moving forward with lunch. It would be held in 2 areas, whether it be the hybrid model or the in-person model. Set it up like a very large classroom with desks and chairs 6 feet apart from each other. the cafeteria furniture is actually not very efficient for what we're trying to do, because you're trying with the furniture that we purchased. Obviously, more kids are supposed to be on those benches and tables than will be allowed with this model or either of these models. So we would move those, because they're more portable, to the gymnasium, so that we could put those up against the wall or in the hallway when we needed to have other activities going on in there. So I'll stop there for a second and take questions on the feasibility piece.
Okay. I don't see any, John. So if you
Okay.
want to.
And we will move on to the models. And I'll stop after each model so you can have time to ask any questions. So the first one is the in-person model. And basically in this model, students will receive in-person instruction full-time in school environments that have been appropriately modified to address the health and safety requirements issued by DESE. There would be obviously some accommodations that would need to be made with scheduling and different protocols and facilities and things like that. So it would still look different than pre-COVID classroom instruction, because we would still need to maintain that additional distancing of 3 feet for the in-person, as I mentioned earlier. So I mentioned already about the feasibility piece. We also, as much as possible at the elementary and middle school level, would be keeping students together in a cohort or like amount of groups with a classroom teacher as much as possible. This will also help us with the contact tracing. When we need overflow spaces, we would be utilizing existing spaces on campus, and then we would have to look at additional spaces outside of campus to make up the difference. The goal is also to have the specials, which is art, music, PE, and library, in the students' school days as part of this model, and they would be going to the classrooms with the exception of probably PE, which if it's outside, they would be going outside. If it's health class or indoor games, would most likely stay in that classroom. The in-person model would also, we would have to eliminate the shared furniture and supplies. I mentioned that earlier with the storage. We would have in this model, and you'll see in the hybrid model, designated breaks for masks that would either be outside or in a large area like a gymnasium, appropriately maintaining the distancing. Lunch I already mentioned. Lockers and cubbies, when we start out with, will not be used by students. There's a couple of reasons for this. One is it would be very difficult to keep that 6-foot distancing or 3-foot distancing if they're wearing masks as students are going to their lockers. We're talking about students, and obviously they're going to want to socialize and all that. And the other thing is we do not have the capacity to be continuing to clean the hundreds of lockers in our schools. So we're at this point, we're taking those offline. We may be able to reevaluate that as we go through the school year, but right now they're going to be offline. This also makes it more challenging with a full in-person model because students are going to have to bring their backpacks, etc., into the classroom. So you have the 22 desks plus the backpacks, which makes it a much more congested area. The other piece I do want to talk about here is about band and chorus. So we did receive guidance from DESE last Friday about more of the arts, band, chorus, physical education. And at this point, the playing of brass and woodwind instruments, part of band, can only be done outside with 10-foot distancing with masks. The chorus also at this time can only be done outside with the 10-foot distancing with masks. So it doesn't mean we're not going to have band and chorus. We're going to continue to work closely with the music teachers and to see what we can do. Obviously, you can do some instruction inside that is not instrument related. You can teach students how to read music. You can use some of the other instruments that are non-woodwind or brass. Or you could go a little bit more virtual like they did in the spring. So those are things that we're going to be currently continuing to look at. But that is also for the hybrid model as well, not just the in-person model. So the advantages and disadvantages, obviously the advantages are all students are in school, except the students that are choosing to be full remote learners. The disadvantages, we just do not have enough classroom space to maintain the 3-foot distancing, so we would need to rent additional classroom space and additional staff we would need to hire to supervise those spaces. As I mentioned, we would need to rent space for all of the excess furniture that we have, except for the furniture that we could set up in the cafeteria for lunch. Staff availability due to health conditions, which is something I know Erin brought up earlier. And there is a true comfort level among staff and concerns, as you saw by the survey. I'll stop there and take questions on the in-person.
Any questions? Okay, I don't see any, John.
Okay, moving on to the hybrid model. So the hybrid model is when the students alternate between in-person learning with safety requirements and remote learning. In this model also, there will be a group of students, high need students, students at risk that will be participating full-time in person for both of the groups. And I'll get into that in a little bit. So when you take a look at an example of this, and I'll try to explain this using this diagram. So in a typical elementary school, let's say you have 3 grade 3s in the model. The grade 3, what we want to try to do is try to have at least one of the grade 3s in each cohort. So a cohort is a group of students that will stay together for the period of time that will be in person and for the period of time that they will be remote. So in this example here, grade 3, we have 2 groups that are going to stay in cohort A and 1 group that's going to stay in cohort B. The reason why we're splitting them into the 2 different cohorts rather than have all in the same cohort is so that we can try to accommodate families that have multiple children in the school, which I know is going to be a challenge, but by doing it this way, we'll be able to do that. So now you take each of those cohorts, which let's say the average class size is 22 students, and then you split them up into 2 separate classrooms. So in cohort A, grade 3, you split the first group into classroom 1 and classroom 2. And then that second group that's in cohort A, you split them into classroom 3 and 4. So now each of those classrooms have, instead of 22 students, they have 11 students. Each of those classrooms will have an adult. One will be the primary teacher. One will be another adult, another staff member. It could be a teacher. It could be a paraeducator or a tutor or a specialist. The primary teacher will be teaching from one classroom with a high-end video camera, which we purchased, as you saw, we purchased a significant amount of camera technology that will allow our teachers to move around the room, and the camera will zoom in and out and go from side to side, and that will be broadcast to the other room on the smartboard using Zoom or Microsoft Teams. Students in the other room would be able to interact with that teacher two ways. One is by the microphone set up for Zoom on the computer, or two, through the other adult that's in that classroom. The primary teacher would also be moving back and forth between the two classrooms, as well as the other adult. So that teacher will be working with those students like they would in a traditional classroom setting when they're in small group instruction. So would envision maybe a mini introduction to a lesson and then breaking the students up into groups. Remember, these students are 6 foot apart in each classroom, and they'd be working on different areas with manipulatives, which they would most likely have their own manipulatives, individual, and so forth. So those students would be in person week 1 in cohort A. Meanwhile, in grade 3, cohort B, the teacher that is with those students, they would be remote. And that cohort B teacher would be teaching them remote during that time. When we go to week 2, the cohorts switch. So now the 2 grade 3 cohort A groups, they would now become remote, and they would be taught by the primary classroom teacher. And then the grade 3 cohort B group would be in person, and they would split into 2 groups, just like before. 2 classrooms with half the students in each one, with the camera, with the other adult in the room, and that would be in-person instruction. When you go to the middle school, similar model, it's going to be set up by team. So there are 4 groups in this team. For those of you that are middle school, it'd be group 71, 72, 73, 74, for example. So group 1 and group 2, group 3, and group 4 would all be in cohort A. They would split into 2 classrooms again. So the class sizes would be halved. Same concept where you would have a camera with the primary teacher, another adult in the other, and then they would be having the instruction, and the teacher would be going in between the 2 rooms. Again, we'll try to keep the rooms adjacent. Most of our, at Parker Middle School, there are not adjacent doors, so it would have to be through the hallway. At Coolidge, there are adjacent doors, so they would be able to go through the classroom to the other one. There is also another group another set of groups. So that would be the other team, which is not listed here, and they would be cohort B. So these 4 groups would be in person week 1, and then they would flip remote week 2. Cohort B would then flip flop in week 2. They would be in person, and cohort A would be remote. I don't have a high school slide, but I will try to explain the high school model. So the high school hybrid model, they are, oh, actually, Tom has a question, Chuck.
Yep, Tom?
Hey, thank you, Dr. Doherty. Sorry about that.
Okay.
Just first of all, the video purchasing is great. So thank you for working through that so that the smart boards can be used. I'm wondering about the feasibility of the microphones, the computers and the smart boards, and whether they can capture conversation from across the room or not to make it really interactive. Have we test trialed that essentially to see how well it picks up the voices across the room and whether or not that's actually going to be feasible, or whether the other teacher is going to have to basically proxy the questions back and forth between the rooms?
Yeah, that's a good question. We're in the process of testing all of that right now, Tom, and we'll have to see if we do need to purchase some additional microphones for the satellite classroom.
One more question, if you don't mind, sir.
Yes.
Grade 3, I think we're pretty comfortable with, well, at least I am, because the teachers generally are going to stay with that group of students throughout the week. There's no transitions from math to science to English or anything else really at that level. But at the Parker or Coolidge level, you have you have specialists from a teacher perspective. You have an English teacher, you have a science teacher, you have a social studies teacher, etc. The teachers, are they going to be moving from group 1 to group 2 to group 3 to group 4 throughout the day? Have we figured out the scheduling, and how does that help or hurt the grouping here with regards to contact tracing or other sort of, cross contamination, for lack of a better way to say it?
So I know both schools are working on this right now. It would be very difficult to do in science because you have the lab facilities. It's possible that the other 3 classes the teacher could rotate through, but science would be a little bit different. And I know that both principals are working on that right now.
Okay, thank you.
John, before we move on, we did get an email from a resident on this presentation, and I can read it. It said, can Dr. Doherty speak to the actual advantages of the kids being in school? That was one bullet. Whereas the disadvantages were expanded upon, can we expand upon the advantages in the studies that talk about the advantages? It's a pretty broad question, but I don't know if you want to.
But I'm referring to which, Chuck? I'm looking
be
at the,
one of the.
I'm looking at the email right now.
I'm sorry.
I'm looking at the email right now. Let me see what.
Yeah, so it'll be one of the early slides of this presentation where we talked about.
It'd be the advantages, disadvantages slide of the in-person
Oh,
plan.
well, I'm sorry. I put that the advantage of the students being in school, to me, that's a significant advantage. I mean, obviously, that's what we want. I thought it spoke for itself. So obviously, that's the optimum, is having the kids in person. Yes, that would be the major advantage to that model.
Okay. Anybody else? All right. Ready to move on?
I'll talk a little bit about the high school. I don't have a slide because the high school is a little bit
Aaron.
more complicated. Oh,
Aaron has a question.
okay.
Sorry, are you wrapping up the hybrid presentation or?
No.
are you still- Okay, I can wait till you're done talking about hybrid. I couldn't tell. I have questions, but.
No, go ahead. If you want, we can.
So one of the, in addition to pre-existing health conditions, I think one of the biggest concerns we're hearing about is teachers who have young children. They live in other towns. I know a lot of these towns, we don't even know what they're doing yet, or in some cases, we know that they're doing a different model than this one. Has there been any talk about, like, do you talk to other superintendents? Do you know how many neighboring towns might be going in a similar direction? Is there any way that we can try and accommodate teachers so that they're on similar schedules to their kids?
So every school, yes, I talk to superintendents as large groups, probably 3-4 times a week. Every school district is doing what they feel is best for their school district with the resources available provided. So every school district has its own challenges. Some school districts have a lot more bus transportation than us, which makes it easier to do some models and less easier to do other models. When we were developing our plan, one of the biggest focus areas for us was health and safety, which is why we set up the hybrid model the way we did. So there are school districts that I know of that are close by that have their teachers in full time all the time, and they cohorts show up each day. So one cohort comes in the morning, there's an hour off, and then another cohort comes in the afternoon. There's other school districts that are doing a model where the cohort comes in the morning. It's a week on, week off model. Cohort comes in the morning, then they go home for lunch, and then they teach them remotely in the afternoon. And it's asynchronous, it's not synchronous. We've got others that are doing AB, the 2 days on, 1 day off, 2 days on. So school districts are all over the place. And they're all doing what their feasibility studies are showing them was best for their district.
I understand all of that, and I'm actually a fan of our hybrid model for the reason that our teachers can be fully remote when the children are remote. I think that is going to allow for a much more robust remote curriculum. I'm just really worried about how many teachers we're going to not be able to help work with this schedule.
I agree. Now, I mean, the state would have had to say, this is the model you're using in order to make this happen. And then I'm not criticizing the state because there's a lot that the challenges they're trying to overcome also, but that was the only way we were going to get uniformity across the whole state, is if the commissioner came out and said, you're doing hybrid model with X.
Could they still end up doing that, John?
No, it's local control. The law says local control.
Yeah.
It's the advantage and disadvantage of Massachusetts.
This is a little more out there, but have we ever had teachers who lived in another town but had their children go to school in Reading?
That would be school choice.
Which we voted against.
That's right.
Okay, and that would apply to RISE as well?
No, it doesn't apply to preschool.
Okay.
And we have had Reading teachers who live in other towns in the past have their children go to the RISE preschool. They pay the tuition, obviously. If we had open slots, we did allow them to come in.
Okay. Okay.
I know there's no clean answer for any of these things. I think Tom had a question. I think.
Tom?
Yes, just to finish off on Aaron's line of questioning, Dr. Doherty, I know at one point you were investigating whether we could offer some degree of daycare or something like that for some of the teachers. I don't know if you've been able to finish that from a feasibility perspective, or if you have finished it, or whether that's even still on the table. But that might be the last question on this line of questioning here. Is daycare something we're still considering?
In order to do the daycare, we would have to find alternative space outside the school district. So we've not pursued that any further because of that reason.
Is that good, Tom?
Yeah, I mean, it is what it is right now, right? I mean,
Yeah.
The only question, I guess, to take that forward is if we find that we run a problem, and this is a big if, right? So we don't even know where we're going with it necessarily, but could we reach out to the library about some of their space? You know, then it starts to be creative time, right? And we've got so many moving parts right now. I think we'll let that one lie until it becomes a problem.
Yeah, exactly. I don't think we can create solutions for problems that don't exist right now, or at least we don't specifically know about.
Yeah, and certainly, Tom, we're open to looking at anything to keep our teachers working, the schedules that we're putting together. So we could certainly look at it if it becomes a major issue. We still got a month, so we'll see. We'll figure it out. I'll briefly talk about the high school schedule, the high school model. So the high school is going to be moving to a block schedule. I believe Kate said that those periods are going to be 80 minutes each. Now, the advantage to doing a block schedule is that there'll be less times during the day that the students would be moving from room to room. So instead of having, say, 6 classes, you're going to have 3 or 4 classes during the day. So that will allow for more in-depth teaching. So It would be in every other day of those classes. They would be in person the 4 days, but they would have different classes 2 of the 4 days. And then when they're remote, that teacher would follow them to be the remote teachers, and those students would be, when they're in person, be split into the 2 satellite rooms, as in the other 2 levels. There will be a small group of teachers. I should mention that the cohorts are going to be grade 9, 10 will be cohort A, grade 11 and 12 will be cohort B. There are a small handful of teachers that would be teaching cross cohorts. So when those students are in person, they would be teaching in person. When those students are remote, they will be teaching them remote. So and Principal Boynton is working on those individual schedules with those teachers.
John, just before you jump, I know you had to jump into this, but I missed we had a question from Dr. Coram about any work being done on the Wi-Fi. I don't know if you want to touch on that, or Gail touch on that.
The
briefly.
Wi-Fi in the building, or the Wi-Fi hotspots?
I guess it would be hotspots, yeah.
Okay.
No, I think he was referring to in the building and extending it slightly outside the building to support, external learning under a tent or a classroom outside for a day in nice weather or something like that.
Oh, I didn't read it. Well, okay, that's fine.
So we're working on all of our infrastructure right now, both inside. We did purchase 20 hotspots, and we may be purchasing some more based on the survey results for those families that do not have internet access. But we are looking at our technology infrastructure inside the buildings as well.
Okay, thank you.
So a couple of things about the hybrid model is that, as I mentioned, we're going to have some students in person both weeks, and the categories that DESE have identified, and we're going to be defining these even further. I know Dr. Stice and her team are working on this. So obviously pre-H school students with disabilities and the role model students, we are going to try to have Rise Preschool in session, both role models and students with disabilities, both weeks. The next category will be students with significant and complex needs. This would most likely be the majority of our program students, if not all of our program students. And that will, as you can see, is defined. Students who cannot engage in remote learning due to their disability-related needs. Students who primarily use aided and augmentative communication, students who are homeless, students in foster care or congregate care, and students duly identified as English language learners. We may expand on this list as we continue through this process, but these students we have identified as being in person both weeks. John Parks had a question.
I'm sorry, John?
That's fine. Do we know rough numbers at this point? I know Dr. Stice and the whole team have been doing an incredible job. I've heard great things about ESY and everything else. Do we have rough numbers per school that we're looking at this time? Or is that something that's still in the midst of being defined?
I can let Jen answer that, but I don't believe we've identified all the students yet, but I can let Jen answer that.
Yes, hello. So we are looking at each student individually, and we're waiting for some more guidance from the state, which we anticipate either this week or next week. That will really help us work with families as to what is going to be appropriate for each student. Because we really can't just, say, oh, this is the model, everyone's doing it. We're going to go through student by student and make sure that it's appropriate and it works for them and their families. So we'll be able to provide more definite numbers within the next couple of weeks.
Okay, and as far as, obviously, we need those numbers before we can identify the number of special ed teachers that are going to be affected with the 2-week, both cohort A and B in school.
Yes, and so one of the things that the state has told us is that they are expecting us to provide the IEP services, but they are allowing us some flexibility. So, for example, if there's a student who is in school on an A week, they could maybe receive both of their special ed services for A and B week while they're in person. There's a whole bunch of options that we're really going to have to look at in terms of each student's individual learning to figure it out and work with the staff. We have 2 special education staff meetings for the teachers, paras, and all the related service providers and team chairs next week to really start discussing all of these things in detail.
Excellent. Thanks, Jen.
Yes, you're welcome. Thank you.
Tom had a question.
Yeah, thank you. Jen or Dr. Doherty, maybe a corollary question to John is, IEPs have a per cycle related thing on them, right? And the cycle essentially is changing with these models, which may impact the 75% calculation that goes into that. So as you're thinking through that, and it's just one of those other moving parts, it would seem that cycle change and what makes 75% potentially could change, and so the number of students that apply for that portion of this clause could change. I'm sure you're already thinking about that, but I just wanted to raise that as a concern that I've heard from a few parents as we look through this. And are we going to have to, as a result, maybe rewrite or provide updates to IEPs to recognize the cycle change as a result of this?
I'll let Jen answer that.
So that's a great question and something we've been asking the state for a while. So we are hoping that that's part of the guidance they're going to provide us in the next couple of weeks, because again, to say we're providing all of the services in the IEP and we're no longer doing supports and resources, but there's flexibility in how that's provided, those are almost contradictory statements in terms of what a grid looks like and how do we implement it. And so we really need more guidance on the state, and we're going to definitely be looking at that closely. We're also expecting the state to give us some guidance. I last heard it referred to as COVID compensatory services or additional services for what was lost during the remote sessions. And so we're hoping that we're going to have all of that information that we can then plan individually for every student and what is going to make sense to them. And we're also waiting for the state to really give us guidance on what does the documentation for the parents look like? Are we doing individual learning plans again, or are we doing something different if we need to have changes? So I hope within the next couple of weeks to have all of those specific answers for you.
Thank you.
Carla?
Carla has a question. Yeah.
Thank you. I have 3 questions, if you don't mind. So you had mentioned for the high school that it's going to be in a block system for classes, 80-minute classes.
Yes.
Does that affect students' ability to graduate with the policy that we have in place right now? Or
Yeah.
would that need to be?
They'll still be able to get the requisite credits.
They'll still be able to.
They'll be able to get the requisite credits necessary to graduate.
Okay, even how would they be able to fit if the classes are extended, right? If the class time is extended, are they going to be able to get all of their additional requirements in?
Yes. Yes.
Yeah?
Yes.
Okay.
Because it's a combination of in-person and remote learning. It's not just the in-person piece.
Okay, it's just spread out differently, I guess.
Yeah.
Okay.
I think
And,
the reason, Carla, why they wanted to do the block was to minimize the amount of time students were out of the classroom
right,
passing.
okay, all right, great. And my next question is, I know that some classrooms enjoy having a primary teacher and an additional teacher in the classroom, and that additional teacher could possibly be assigned to a specific student. And speaking in terms of these classrooms being split into two and having the teacher in, the main teacher, I'll call it, in one classroom, and then an additional teacher or appropriate supervisor, so to speak, in the other classroom, I guess my concern is I wouldn't want to see a para or a person who's assigned to a student for a special education piece to be that additional classroom teacher, right?
Yeah, if a student is, if a paraeducator is, or a teacher is assigned specifically to one student, no, that would not be the adult.
Okay, so there would be, it seems to me, I don't know, maybe I'm totally off, that we may need additional teachers in the building.
I know the principals are working out those schedules right
Okay.
now. So my understanding is they're able to do it. We may need a little bit of staffing. We don't know yet as we go
Okay.
through this. The other X factor is the remote piece. How many students are gonna go remote, completely remote?
Okay, and my third, I just asked this question, I'm sure you're going to cover full day kindergarten differentiation between full day and half day?
Yes, we can do
Okay.
that.
Perfect,
Yes.
thank you.
Okay, John.
Okay, I'm gonna see if there's anything here. Okay, so in the hybrid model, I already talked about the A week, B week. The students will be, when they're in person, they will be assigned the 4 full days, and then Friday is going to be, and that includes elementary. The Wednesday is gone. The Wednesday afternoon piece is now gone. It's been moved to Fridays. So Friday's going to be a half-day remote learning day for all students. The way we're envisioning this is when they're in person, and it's the Friday is the remote day of the in-person week, that teacher will be transitioning and working with those students as they transition into the Friday. So they'll be assigning work. They'll be then on Friday or projects, and then on the Friday they'll be doing some synchronous work in the morning. In the afternoon, time is being set aside for staff for meetings to plan together, to work, because there's going to need to be a significant amount of time for planning as they're going back and forth between these two models. It really is two different worlds that we're now entering in a hybrid model, and neither world really looked like the pre-COVID school model that we had in the past. So there's going to need to be that time given to staff to be able to work together on those Fridays. So that's what the purpose of the Friday piece is. From a school perspective, the Fridays are also a day that we could do additional cleaning throughout the district, and then that gives us the 72 hours also disinfecting time that I know that the CDC has recommended. And
Sean has a question.
Sean has a question. Okay.
Yeah. So first, I want to echo Carla's comments. Just thanking you, Dr. Doherty, the whole staff, everybody in the working teams for all the thought that's gone into all this. You've done a tremendous amount of work to try and make the best of a bunch of bad options, and so really appreciate that, and the proactive and repeated communication with the community. I know a lot of people who are often critical in the past have appreciated that. So thank you for that. I like a lot about the hybrid model. The one thing, and it was referenced on the slide before, the one thing that gives me pause, and we've received a bunch of emails about this, is the specialist piece. The notion that a specialist in, say, an elementary school, if I understand this correctly, would basically see every student in the school, over a 2-week period in a live setting. It seems like it potentially undermines a lot of what we're doing in terms of, creating the cohorts and that kind of thing. So what I'm wondering is, if we're considering from a scheduling perspective, one of the suggestions I think that came in this morning was something about, concentrating each special with smaller groups. So instead of having, instead of seeing each specialist every week when they're in person, they might see each specialist, or see one specialist each day for a given week, and then the next specialist the next time in. And so each of those specialists is then only getting exposed to a quarter of the school community, in a given week, or in a given 2-week block, versus everybody in the school community. Are we considering anything like that? Does that work from a scheduling perspective? Is that something we're doing at the building level versus a district policy level? How are you thinking about that?
So, couple of thoughts. We're open to anything that maintains the model we're putting forward, because we think that this is the best model for both teachers and kids, and as you said, in a bad situation that we have. There are several teachers. In order for any hybrid model to work, and it doesn't matter which configuration, there are going to be a set number of teachers that are going to be in person both weeks. In some models, it's the classroom teacher that's in person both weeks. In other models, it's the specialists. And in this model here, it's specialists, special education teachers, paraeducators, tutors. There are also other staff that are going to be in person the whole time. All of your custodians, food service secretaries, administrators are going to be in person all the time. So they're not the only teachers that are the only staff that are going to be in both weeks. Having said that, I've had numerous conversations over the last week since the model's been released. We're open to anything that keeps the model. One of the challenges with elementary that may restrict us from doing what was suggested this morning is a lot of school districts have full-time specialists in their buildings. Our specialists are not full-time in a building, they travel between buildings. So in an ideal world, if we had a full-time art, music, PE, library in every building, yes, we could pull off a lot different. It would look a lot different. But we unfortunately don't have that option here. So that's really one of our biggest challenges, is we just don't have this. We only have 3.0 music teachers and 2.7 art teachers. We do have close to a full-time PE teacher in every building. We have a couple buildings where it's a 0.8 or a 0.9. And library, we do have full-time in every building. So that's our biggest challenge, is we just don't have the full-time staffing in every building for specialists. But we're willing to look at anything.
Yeah, I mean, I hear what you're saying, but I would argue that, or I would suggest that having specialists work across buildings actually heightens or enhances the value of thinking about the specialist schedule for a given class or a given cohort or a given grade level at a given school, however you want to break it up. Doing that in a concentrated way versus seeing each special, live once every 2 weeks and having them rotate through mini classes across multiple buildings. If we could do it in a concentrated way, so that instead, second grade at Birch Meadow is seeing art, 3 times a week, 2 weeks during the first semester versus, 6 times during the semester, spread across 6 weeks. You eliminate some of that, risk of cross-contamination, for lack of a better phrase, having the specialist see so many different classes and so many different students in a short period of time across multiple buildings.
Understood.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah, Aaron has a question.
Hi. I have a lot of concerns about the specialist. So I appreciate that you are open to maybe some other ideas around that, as I imagine, from the sound of things, from the letters we've received, that the specialist teachers, I think, probably have some other ideas how this could look as well. So I agree with Sean that I'm really concerned about how much contact we're setting up for them to have, because then they're putting at risk every single classroom that they're entering if somebody comes down with something. But also, I wanted to clarify about the Fridays. I didn't previously think that anything synchronous was happening on Friday. So when you say synchronous Friday morning, like how much of Friday morning? And you said that kids are half day Friday, but is that still a full day for the teachers? And I'm asking because I'm worried about the amount of planning and preparation that I think they're going to need to be able to do. So, you know, we're talking about they need to plan for the remote week, the following week. They need to probably plan within their school, right, within the same grade to make sure that they stay on track. But hopefully there's some cross-town, across grade collaboration that's able to happen so that, you know, elementary schools are staying on the same track. But then on top of that, are we asking them to also do planning with the specialist teachers for the time that they're spending in class together?
So it's a full day for teachers. So that their planning time is built into that.
Okay. So how long do you imagine that they're synchronous with kids on Fridays?
We're in the process of working that out, and I don't want to put a time limit right now on it, just because it's still a moving target.
Okay, but we're not talking about like until noon, probably something.
No.
Okay. Is anybody looking at not using specialists in this way? Is there any way?
So you and I have had this conversation offline, and I said it again tonight. In order for any hybrid model to work, there will need to be a group of teachers in person all the time. If it's not the specialists, it's going to be the classroom teachers. It's going to be the same. So you've got the same challenge. And that means also they're going to be teaching they're going to be teaching remotely and in person at the same time. There is no perfect hybrid model. If there was, then we'd all be doing the same model. So every schedule has a challenge, and this is the challenge, but we felt that this model was best for kids and was best for staff, so they wouldn't have to be teaching both remote and in person at the same time. We're open to looking at other things that would keep this model, but one of our challenges is we do not have full-time specialists in every elementary school.
Okay. But if they propose something else that still allows the classrooms to be covered, we're open to looking at that.
I believe that what they're proposing, what they're talking about, is what's called the Acton-Boxborough model, and Acton-Boxborough has full-time specialists in every building. Again, we're more than happy to look at something that will maintain the model we're currently moving forward.
And with the current plan as it's outlined, kids are only getting art and music and library half the time as they normally would?
Yes, but it's in person. And one of the complaints we heard from the specialists last spring was the fact that they really had difficulty teaching their subjects remotely.
Okay. All right, let's see where it goes.
So, thank you, Aaron. John, we had a question along these lines from Mary Ann Downing regarding, I have a question about the specialist not teaching remotely. Does that apply to middle school and high school? What is happening with band and chorus then, if they cannot possibly teach live, given cannot be in the building, and are not teaching remotely because they are helping other teachers? What exactly the band and music teachers doing? I am asking particularly at the middle school level. Wouldn't it make more sense for specialists to try to teach band remotely, for example, with students playing live via Zoom? What is supposed to happen with band and music during the live week? Are there plans to hold these classes out of doors? Can we rent tents?
So I believe I talked about this at the beginning of the presentation, but first, I guess I'll talk general first. The development of a schedule is extremely complex. Having done it at the middle school for many years, there's a lot of moving parts to it. And now we're trying to create a schedule that is looking at two different models at the same time, two different school models, an in-person and a remote. And then on top of that, we have to do it in a way that conforms with all of the other moving parts that are going on. So I know for a fact that our middle school principals have already done probably 20 renditions of schedules to try to get the best schedule possible for staff and students. So I don't know where they're at with the specialists at the middle school. I know that they're working on it. In terms of the high school, they're all courses, so they're not going to be, it's going to look different with the high school specialists as well. In terms of band and chorus, band and chorus can happen outside with 10-foot distancing, as per DESI guidelines. It cannot happen inside. Again, we're working with the fine arts department, the music department to be as creative as possible. It can happen inside if we're not using woodwind, brass instruments, or singing. So you can do other things like learning how to read music, using instruments that do not require the use of wind. So we're looking at all those things, but building a schedule is extremely difficult, and it's even more difficult right now.
Okay, thank you. Okay, it doesn't look, oh, John Parks.
Sorry. Dr. Doherty, I know I don't want to get in the weeds with this one. If there's a way we can do a rough estimate on tracing and the number of students that the specialist would get involved with, I'd like to hear a rough number, because if we've got teachers, specialists covering 2 schools, we're looking at those 2 schools basically being needing to be traced per teacher. So if we could do that before
John,
the vote.
I couldn't even give you a rough estimate right now because we haven't been able to put the schedules together yet.
Okay. It's going to be hard to take a vote not knowing things like that on a model.
But that's an operations part of the model. No matter what hybrid model we use, we're going to have teachers in there both weeks.
Oh, I agree. I just want to know if we can get some rough numbers.
I won't be able to do that, John, because I don't know who's going to stay completely remote, who's not going to stay completely remote. I don't even want to give a number because it's not going to be accurate.
Okay.
Aaron?
Hi. So Mary Ann's email had mentioned tents. I know we've spoken about this previously offline, John, but I would like to know how much it would cost us to buy some tents at some of the schools. I think particularly if we want to make a best effort to try and support our music programs, but also in terms of just letting teachers have another space where they can take kids. So I would love to know, at least research the pricing on that and the feasibility.
We could certainly do that. The feasibility, it's very difficult to find tents right now, particularly the size that we'd be looking for. If we need to maintain a 10-foot distancing between every student to have band class outside, you would need a very large tent for 100 band kids. And same with chorus, because our chorus and band numbers are fairly large. So we could certainly look at prices, but I'm not sure.
Yeah, we had
I'm
this
not sure
discussion. We had this discussion on Monday, and I think Gail mentioned that the availability of tents is almost none available
Right.
out there.
And we're encouraging staff to go outside if it's nice out, and then they could take their entire class with proper social distancing. A tent is not necessary to do that. I mean, we've had classes pre-COVID that go outside all the time without tents.
Right, but I think it would buy us more time. Even if we can't get a tent for September, I think it would buy us the ability to have outside time later into the year.
Oh, you would not want a tent with sides on it. You wouldn't have proper ventilation.
I just think that having the actual coverage of the tent.
We can certainly look at it, but the feasibility is not practical to maintain those tents.
Thank you for being willing to look at it.
Well, we'll be more than happy to.
Okay. Well, you gonna sneak under the wire, John?
You talking about to me,
That
John?
was a joke to John Parks.
I missed something.
I said, you gonna sneak a question under the wire here?
No, I'm good this time.
John, go ahead.
I think I've already gone over this slide and this slide. So, in terms of what it's gonna look like at each level, and I will focus more on the kindergarten because I know Carla asked this question. So with the full day and a half day piece, the full day piece, the students would be coming 4 full days in person, and then they will have the longer days remote, which is, we're still figuring that out, and obviously that's going to be a developmentally appropriate amount of time in a mix of screen time and non-screen time, because what we obviously don't want is a full day kindergarten student on screen for 6 straight hours. For half day, they would be coming in till 11:30 each day on the remote day, on the in-person days, and they would most likely have like 1 or 2 hours of remote time when they're remote. I don't know if Carter, if that addressed your question, but we're continuing to work on that piece.
And can I add here in terms of curriculum?
So the curriculum for half day is going to focus mostly on ELA and math. The curriculum for full day will include science and social studies, which is what we've been doing for the last couple of years.
Okay, why did I think that the curriculum was the same for a full day as it was for half day, but for a full day they just had more time and,
No,
and
when the
potentially more
standards
specials?
when the standards changed, a few years ago is when we made that change.
Maybe I understood it improperly.
It used to be that way. You're correct. But then when the standards changed a couple of years ago, when they added the kindergarten specific grade level standards, that's when we made the change.
Okay, thank you.
Go ahead, John.
So the advantages of this model, it's going to allow for greater physical distancing and smaller in-person class sizes. The model also provides the opportunity to meet with students in person to set goals and expectations for remote learning time. when they go into their remote learning week. It also allows us to give them copies of material, supplies, things like that for their remote lessons. We chose the 1 week on, 1 week off model. In the event of a suspected outbreak, 10 days of at-home learning will allow for symptoms of COVID-19 to surface prior to a return to in-person learning. And teachers will be either teaching in person or remote, but not simultaneously. That was one of our biggest driving factors going with this model, and it maximizes the use of all of our staff. Certainly the disadvantages is all students are not in person. Some staff will need to be in person both weeks, and the specialist schedules will look different than the traditional model, and it is difficult for families and staff with this model. I'm going to continue to remote. Is that okay? Or are there more questions on this?
So there was a question from a teacher regarding, we already touched on this, the school choice and whether we can offer school choice to teachers for RISE. I don't know the answer to that. I don't know whether you can laser things in or out of school choice, or whether it has to be all for.
No, RISE is not under school choice, but we can only do it if there's slots available.
Okay.
So we would have to check as we get closer if there are slots available.
Okay.
So the remote model, it's a weekly structured schedule with a combination of daily synchronous, asynchronous work. Synchronous is live. Asynchronous would be offline or remote. Posted lessons, videos, recorded lessons. That would be the definition of an asynchronous model. It's going to look much different than it did in the spring. Both the Department of Education and us are going to raise the expectations. There will be attendance that's going to be mandatory, very similar to an in-person model, so there'll be a compulsory attendance. There'll be expectations for online engagement. We'll be using, obviously, different technology tools, so we'll make sure that we have certain protocols and processes in place, because I know that that was an issue in the spring, and there will be grading and feedback during the remote model. There will also be a population of students, assuming that it is safe to go to school. There will be a population of students that will be in person if we're allowed to. The remote school day is going to follow a typical school day, depending upon the developmental level. We'll be teaching the major disciplines as well as the specialties. And there'll be opportunities for students to connect with teachers during office hours or other small group settings. So as I mentioned earlier, we're going to have a synchronous amount of time. These will be lessons. They'll have direct access to a live teacher with Google Classroom, Zoom, and Microsoft Teams. The students may, during this time, be not interacting with the teacher and working on small group lessons, but the teacher will be there live to assist them if needed. And both Zoom and Teams has the ability to set up small group sessions within the larger group session. Then there's also the asynchronous piece, which means that the students will be guided, their work will be guided independently or with the aid of a parent or other caregiver. And again, that's going to depend on the developmental need. And this will include time for completing homework or projects or receiving additional services. So we've purchased several tools, and we did present this at a previous time to help enhance our remote model. So as you know, we've now purchased Zoom. We also still have Microsoft Teams, and it was asked during the sessions, why do you still have that? Microsoft Teams actually integrates very nicely with our Office 365 software, which we do have a license for the whole district. They also have enhanced their tool. I believe in the fall they're going to a 7x7 model for their panels. So you will have, I believe, up to 49 panel people at the same time can be seen. I know they got some other new features as well. We've purchased replacement laptops, additional devices for families, wireless hotspots for families, online curriculum resources, which Chris has presented to you. I believe it was the last meeting, and online assessment tools to support the work. So obviously the advantage is going to be much different than last spring. It's going to be a more consistent platform and conferencing tools, and the computer access piece should not be an issue compared to the spring with all of the additional tools that we've purchased. The disadvantage is obviously it's not in person. It's the least effective of the learning models from a teaching and learning standpoint. Students at risk may be impacted, particularly if we're remote with those students. It is difficult for families and staff, and it means we are most likely in a second wave of infection if we're all remote, which obviously wouldn't be a good thing. So quickly to some other things I just want to bring up. I'll try to go as quickly as possible. The commissioner has reduced the amount of required school days for students from 180 to 170. And I think Sean has his hand raised. Chuck.
Sean, sorry.
Actually, John and Aaron were both before me, but I can wait until you finish this slide.
I thought they already.
Oh, those are new ones.
Those are
Well,
new ones, but I'd
all right.
rather see him finish this slide, Chuck, and then I'll ask after.
okay.
You want me to continue?
Yes.
Okay. So the commissioner reduced the amount of required school days for students from 180 to 170. Those additional 10 days, the difference in the 10 days is going to be used on the front end for staff training and professional development. Obviously, we're basically redoing school. And so no matter what model we are in, school is going to look different than it ever has before. So there will be obviously health training. There'll be routines and procedures training, even lunch training. What's lunch going to look like? How to use all of the technology tools, all of the different aspects. So as a result of that, the school year will be starting either September 14th, 15th, or 16th for students. We're in the process of putting that calendar together, and we will be presenting that calendar to the school committee next week for approval. One of the other things that actually I think has been a benefit of moving forward with a remote learning model is that it gives us greater flexibility when we have adverse weather condition days. And I'm including not just snow days, but heat days, that these days can now be looked at as remote learning days if they're called as no school days, which will then be remote learning days instead. The heat days, we're going to follow, and we're looking at exactly what this will look like, but we're going to follow the National Weather Service heat index chart. And if we're in some sort of extreme danger condition for heat, given the fact that we do not have air conditioning in our schools, and the fact now that we're going to be wearing masks most of the day, we will be taking a look at heat days as an option for remote learning days. So that is definitely something that I hope we don't have to use it this year, but that's now an option that at our disposal that we could do. In terms of transportation, because of all the additional requirements that's now been put on us by the state, we are only offering transportation this year for mandatory riders, which would include special education in the IEP, homeless transportation, foster care, and K through 6, 2 miles or greater. We will not be doing a bus at the high school or in grade 7 and 8 at the middle school. The capacity of the bus has been changed. The whole cleaning protocol of the buses have changed. And it is possible we'll also need to be hiring bus monitors for buses as well. So we are going to be limiting the transportation to mandatory transportation. That also includes our MECO transportation. PPE, we have purchased a significant amount of PPE or in the process of ordering a specific amount of PPE, and we will be continuing to take a look at what other PPE is going to be needed or required. I know that Jen and Gail and Joe Huggins have been working, and Mary Juliana have been working on the different pieces of this. So I want to assure the community that we will have sufficient PPE for staff and students. Temperature checks, DESE has recommended that we do not do temperature checks. And the basic reason for this is that it produces a lot of false positives, false negatives. We will be sending out parent information as we get closer to the school year that we are going to ask parents to do their self-check. And if their child is sick, to please keep them home for that day. And if necessary, if symptoms persist, to get their child tested. So we will not be doing temperature checks. That is a question that came up several times in the community forum, so I just wanted to put that out there. We are required also to have isolation rooms, so Mary Juliana is working closely with the principals to identify those rooms in case we do have a student that has been infected or needs to be quarantined once they come to school. Extracurricular activities and athletics, I've touched on a little bit, the band and chorus. Athletics, all athletics has been suspended until September 14th, and we're hoping to hear more guidance in the near future. I'll be honest, I don't know what's going to happen given the fact that at the professional level, we've had a lot of cases of infection and they have the resources to do testing all the time. So I don't know where athletics is going to go at the high school level this year. So more to come on that. Lunch, I believed I already touched upon. Extended day, we do have plans on offering extended day to in-person students. We're working out those plans. And communication, as you know, we've done a lot of communication over the last, well, since school ended, but even ramped it up even more over the last couple of weeks with the forums and individual office hours. I know as we get closer to the beginning of the school year that the principals are going to be offering their own forums for parents because there's only so much information I can talk about at a district level. At some point, the principals are going to have to talk at a more building specific level on how this impacts individual buildings. So more to come on that. And I believe that's it.
Okay, so we had John, Aaron, and then Sean.
So Dr. Dory, two questions, if you don't mind. First and foremost is the uniformity across the board for tools being used at the district level. I know this came up, and I've been to all three of the parent meetings. Are we looking at having the teachers specifically use tools, Google, whether it be Google Classroom, Office 365, Zoom versus Teams? Are we going to start focusing more on limiting what those tools are going to be, and that way the parents know what they're expected to look at?
Yeah.
Or is that going to be done at the school level?
No, yes. To answer your question, yes. We've begun holding trainings. In fact, the first one is Friday with a technology consultant that's going to set expectations as to where things should be posted, what things should be happening at each level, what tools are going to be used for consistency, those type of things. In the spring, because it was like flipping a light switch, and there was a lot of free tools available.
Yeah.
So teachers were doing a lot of experimenting, which complicated matters. So that's going to all change now, and that's part of the 10-day training will include all of those protocols and procedures.
And then my second question, Chuck, if you don't mind. One of the things I found very interesting, and I heard it from two different parents during those sessions, is offering some type of parent class for the technology, so the younger, parents can actually know what the kids are getting into, whether it be Google Classroom and they're shooting messages back and forth under a hidden chat, just exposing the parents to the tools we're using. And I don't know if our IT group has bandwidth to say we're going to open up a session, twice or before school opens. This is something I'd like to see. I'm not going to say, it has to be done, but if we have the bandwidth, is really being able to have the parents be able to see the technology so they know how to use it as well.
Yes, and the way I answered that question at the forum is that would be something our tech integration specialists should be able to put together to educate the parents.
Yep. Thank you.
Aaron?
Hi, thank you. I have a few questions, some of them going back a little bit. In the hybrid model, I think you had said at some point that kids might be on a staggered start. And I was wondering, I know that we've always had like a hard and fast about when we start paying teachers to be in the building. So like at elementary school, I think it's like 8:10 or something. In order to allow for the staggered start, would there be some flexibility in that? Like, was that something that we would have to look at?
So we've not determined if we're doing staggered start yet. We're having conversations with the building principals. Certainly that would mean that we would have to shift teacher schedules, which would have to be bargained.
Okay. And in the all remote plan, if we go fully remote, either by choice or by state mandate, there's a potential that happens after we've been hybrid for a while. And in our hybrid model, we have like our specials teachers only teaching in person. We have special education predominantly or fully happening in person. How do they prepare to go fully remote so that they're not caught off guard?
So during the training, the 10-day training, we would be teaching all of the teachers how to use the tools. And they would be teaching remote if we were full remote. The only exception to that may be special education teachers if we still have students coming in person, the high needs students.
And if we're on a full remote schedule, kids would have the specialists as legitimate classes. So not like we did it in the spring where it was sort of like, here's some activities you can do this week, but it would be part of their regular remote schedule.
Yes, it would.
Okay. And then my last question is regarding the PPE. Are we supplying PPE for teachers? Are teachers being asked to supply their own masks?
No, we've purchased enough PPE according to the DESE guidelines for staff and students.
Okay. And I
That
know
doesn't stop staff from bringing their own PPE in if they choose to.
if they choose to, but we will supply it so they don't necessarily have
Yeah,
to.
we've allocated a certain amount of PPE by the DESE guidelines. We use the DESE guidelines
Okay.
when we order.
And I'm pretty sure we talked about this before, but I just want to hear it one more time. We will have face shields or an alternative for teachers who are working with students who are hard of hearing or who are working on learning social emotional cues.
What I'm gonna answer that Jen Stice and Mary Juliana and Gail are working on the appropriate PPE for students based on their needs.
Okay.
Because we have discovered some things during ESY and we are following the guidelines that were put forward by DESE.
Okay. Okay. Thank you.
Sean?
Yeah, Chuck, this question might be as much for you as it is for John, but looking ahead to next week, I'm just trying to understand, the line for me between operational and policy on this one's maybe a little bit fuzzy. Do we have the flexibility? Is our option next week purely to choose one of these three models? Do we have the flexibility to, do some kind of phased approach to choose a model that we're going to use, for the first 4 weeks, and then we're going to revisit? Like, how should we think about that as we go into next week and taking a vote?
So, Chuck, do you want me to answer that?
Yeah, go ahead.
My understanding at the policy level, what you're voting on is the final plans. And then the model that we're going to be using. So hybrid, remote, in person. The specifics of those plans is the operations piece. The way it's phased in is actually a negotiation piece if we need to go down that road.
Yeah, so I think that the second part of your answer answered Sean's question, right? I think you were getting at whether we can start remote and then go to hybrid. Is that basically what you were asking? And
that could be one example. Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah. So where I'm coming from on this is, we're voting on August 6th with, pretty imperfect information about the reality of spread in the classroom and these different models and that kind of thing. We're leaning on a study from South Korea. We're leaning on guidance from the AAP, which, is a little bit non-specific from my perspective. And that's fine. And, we can vote with the imperfect information that we have. What I'm wondering is if, we could open up the option for ourselves to say, schools in the South are going to be, in some states in the South are going to be back full time, a week or two from now in some cases probably. We're going to have a lot more sort of information about what the actual spread looks like in different classroom environments and different models at, say, the end of August or the first week of September. And so what I was wondering is, if we as a committee sort of agreed that we have an intent to get to a particular model that is, more in person than not, whether it's hybrid or full in person, but we wanted to start in a somewhat of a more restricted model, say commit to that through the end of September, for instance, and plan to revisit 3 weeks from now, a month from now, for our permanent model for the rest of the semester. Is that a path we could realistically go down? I recognize that it would present some challenges from a bargaining perspective, and essentially, yeah, go ahead.
Let me try to clarify. So when you're voting on the three plans, basically what you're doing is you're giving me the latitude that if conditions change, we go into another model. So if you vote to say we're starting hybrid, and by mid-August, late August, the numbers are going crazy, we'll go to remote, or we may be forced to go remote. The governor may just say we're going remote, which is probably the most likely scenario. So the reason why you're approving 3 plans is to give us the flexibility to move in and out of the plans based on different conditions.
But I think what Sean asking is, can we, and no pun intended, vote on a hybrid of the plan? So what we vote on is that we say this district starts remote, and on X date, we go to the hybrid model. So vote on a combination of the plans and not just one of the 3.
You
Does
can.
does that make sense? Is that what you were getting at, Sean?
That is what I'm getting at, but I'm hearing John say something different than I understood it to be before, which is that we're not even really voting to endorse, if you will, the hybrid model. We're voting to say these 3 models are acceptable from an in-person perspective, from a hybrid perspective, from a fully remote perspective, and the administration has the operational authority to choose which of the models we're in at any given time. Am I hearing that correctly?
No, you do
No,
vote on the model to
we
start.
vote on the plan.
You vote on the entire plan, but you also vote on the model to start with.
Right.
So as of August 6th, you would vote on a model. And then if conditions change, we would flip to another model. But you don't need to vote again on that.
Because we will have already approved.
Yes.
We will have already approved those other models for you to move into.
Right.
So
But
as a committee, if
Go ahead, Sean. I'm sorry.
Chuck. I was just going to say, if as a committee, our inclination, our objective was to pursue, a quote unquote phased approach, then the path to doing that would be for us to vote for a more remote model, like the remote model, for instance, and then you would have operational control if conditions allow for it, in late August, in middle of September, whatever, to move into the hybrid model.
Yes. It'd be very similar to a snow day. The school committee doesn't vote on a snow day.
Right.
So actually, let me just back. I had a couple questions on this other information first. Are you all set, Sean, for now, or?
I'll just ask one more brief follow-up. So it, I guess, what's the point? And I'm not trying to be flippant here, but what's the point of us voting an initial model if your operational authority means that you can choose the model that's appropriate for the circumstances we're in as we go along? And I'm not suggesting that's wrong or a bad thing. I'm literally saying, what is the actual effect of us voting one model or another next week if your operational control
because
can override
then we
that?
can start moving forward with a model, and I can start sending out communication to parents. I can start figuring out who's going to go fully remote, who's going to so all of that can then start happening. Right now, I can't do any of that because we don't know what the model is that you're voting on.
So John,
okay.
Go ahead. Sorry.
Sorry, I'm not trying to beat a dead horse here. So essentially what we're doing is endorsing your current position on the right model to start with. That's about as far as that vote piece of the vote goes, is an endorsement of your current preference for the starting point. It's not binding on you in any way, I guess is what I'm saying. It gives you that endorsement. It means you can go forward with a lot of the operational things you need to put in place, but it's not binding in any way if conditions change.
You're talking about medical, like the medical conditions you're talking about?
Yeah, or we learn more from other jurisdictions or what have you.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I
Okay.
think if medical conditions change, then all bets are off. That's going to be up to the state anyway, correct?
most likely, yes, I would assume so.
So my question, I think, is, and I don't know what, does the state allow us to, if the committee wanted to vote, and I'll use the term again, a hybrid of the plans that you've offered. So the hybrid being, say, for the first 30 days, we want you to do remote, and then subsequent to that, go to your hybrid plan. I mean, in theory, you've already been doing all of that planning anyway for all of the options, right? So how would that not be? I'm not saying that's what I want. I mean, how would that not be good enough direction for you?
I'm confused at the question.
So the question is, if the committee votes next Thursday to instruct you to open schools remote for the first 30 days and then convert after 30 days, go to the hybrid. Is that something that we could even do? I don't know. Is
You
that?
can, but I'm just curious, and I'm just throwing this out here. What happens after 30 days? What's going to be the determining factor to switch?
It's just it's nothing other than we've kind of gotten used to things and phased it in. That's what a lot of questions we're getting
that's what
from
the committee. Right. No, and I understand that. If that's the direction the committee wants me to look at, I would rather put a recommendation together for the committee to review rather than just pick a random 30 days number.
That's fine. That's fine. I just pulled that. You're right. It was random. I'd say it could be 60 days. I don't know what it is, but it's not for health reasons. It's for a phase in reason. To go remote for health reasons is a totally different situation. And as I said, that's probably not going to be our decision anyway. Did I confuse you more, or?
No, I guess now I'm confused at what I'm supposed to put together 3 final plans for DESI, and if you would like me to go in that direction,
you don't.
I would like some guidance to do that, so that, because I do have to submit something by August 10th, which the school committee is supposed to vote on. So
what's getting submitted Friday? This, correct? The present.
Friday is 3 preliminary plans, and a lot of school districts aren't even making those public. I mean, I felt it was important to make these public to get as much community feedback and input as possible, so that people could see what we were leaning towards, which was the whole purpose behind it.
Me think about. I had some other questions on the other information. On the transportation piece, how does that align with the contract we just signed? In terms of, you said we're cutting back. Maybe I misunderstood you. We're cutting back on transportation?
No. The special education transportation, we still have to do by what's in the child's IEP. It may look different because now we have to look at the masks and the 3-foot, which is basically a third capacity in the buses. The regular ed transportation is also a third capacity, so we're just going with mandatory transportation for next year.
Okay. So my next last question was on the, I'm just trying to get better understanding of the heat snow days. So there never was a heat day before. That's something new, obviously, but with the snow days, are those going to no longer be what they were? So if we have a snow day, that it's not means the schools are closed. They're still they're just going remote.
Correct,
Where in the past you had a day off from school.
correct.
Tom had a question.
Yeah, thanks, Chuck. Maybe not a question, but maybe a clarification here. And that's, I sit there as I was listening to portions of it, so I apologize if some of this came through, but as I was bouncing in and out of the meeting, to Sean's point, or Sean's question, I think what we're doing here and what we're being asked to do is, as the oversight board, review and approve what's been put together. And that's pretty much the extent of it, right? Review and approve what's been put together as the plan, as the administration team, the district leadership team has gone back and forth, back and forth, back and forth, and this is the best models that they're putting forward. And then from there, move forward. But our job is to review, approve. If we want to make suggestions, tonight probably be the right night to make suggestions for changes. If there's anything that we really want to do, based on feedback we've heard from parents or the community or anything else along those lines. But ultimately, the plans that have been put forward, that's our thing. They're not necessarily, in my understanding and reading through the DSE guidance, of saying, hey, I want to do this for 1 month, this for the next month, or anything else along those lines. It really should be, to a degree, black and white of this or that. We either approve or we don't approve the plans that Dr. Doherty and team have put together. That's essentially our role in this regard. So in that regard, my view of the plan as it's put forward right now, I would love to be fully in person personally. I know that's not going to be feasible based upon the feasibility study that's been done. I know there are significant concerns out there. Some people want to be fully remote. It seems to me like, to a degree, where we stand right now is, as I think Sean said, the best of a really bad situation, right? And the recommendation that is out there right now is the hybrid recommendation. And from my perspective, that's the best of a bad situation. While we did have some success, and I think we would be better prepared for remote, there are other consequences of remote that we've also talked about in the past, and this kind of goes to one of the questions before, from a social emotional health perspective of kids not getting back, not seeing their classmates, not being able to be near each other. They might not be as close as they're used to, but there's a lot of positives to getting some degree of in-person instruction. And so from that perspective, I think our job here is to review, provide feedback, commentary tonight, and maybe offline if necessary. So if there's any structural changes that need to happen, they can happen. But when it comes next Thursday, we hopefully have a nearly final version that we're saying yay or nay on. And I think Dr. Doherty is hoping we say yay, right? But that's what the feedback loop is for. That's what the questions are for. That's why the parent sessions are going on, is to try and provide the best and final version by next Thursday of what we can move forward with.
So, thank you. Your point's correct, other than the commentary that's provided could recommend something that's provided in between, could provide something that isn't in these plans that we would vote on next Thursday. Sean?
As I mentioned earlier, Chuck, if
think-
that's going to be the case, then I would like some advance notice, because there could be some real logistical challenges if there's something other than what
I wasn't suggesting that was the case with me, but I'm just, that's what the committee can do is what I'm
They
saying.
can, but then we have to try to implement it, and that's the piece that I'm concerned about. Considering
Carla?
that
Sorry.
it'll be August 6th. That's my concern.
I have to agree with Tom that, are we frozen here? Okay, I have to
No.
agree with Tom that it's, and I think we would be doing a huge disservice to Dr. Doherty and the staff and the principals and the district. People need to make plans and they need to know what's going to happen when school starts in September. And I feel like we need to allow them to do that. You can't, this is not something they can change on a dime. It's a huge amount of work that needs to happen. I agree, Chuck, that we could propose something different. I think we would be doing a huge disservice to the district, to the staff, if we decided to do that. The plan is reasonable for me. It sounds like a better opportunity out of all of the opportunities, and I think that we need to allow people to plan for it, to figure out where we're at in terms of staff and students in the building and outside of the building, and then move forward from there. Going from some kind of hybrid situation to a remote situation is an easier switch. Going from a remote situation into a hybrid situation without having the pre-planning time, I think, is more of a difficult switch. So I like I said, I think it would be a disservice if we didn't follow along and look at what we have in front of us right now.
Yeah, and again, I'll say, I'm not saying that I advocate for that. I'm just saying that that is the prerogative of the committee.
I understand. Yeah.
Aaron?
Hi. So I'm going on the assumption that whatever version we get next week is going to be more fleshed out, more details and specifics about schedules and cohorts. But I am in line with Tom and Carla on this, that I feel like we need to vote on something that is presented to us, because I agree that I think teachers need time to figure out if this is something that they can do. I think families need time to figure out childcare and how they're going to make it work. And I know that our district leadership team has been working so hard to try and make this work. But there's still a lot of scheduling stuff to figure out. So obviously things can change with this pandemic. And I don't expect that what we start in September will necessarily be what we'll be able to do all year. But I do feel strongly that if there can be some face-to-face time between students and teachers in the beginning of the year so that they can start to have some sort of relationship in the event we have to go fully remote later in the year, I think that's important. But definitely, I think we need to have a clear idea of what we're voting on next Thursday so that everyone can move forward with planning.
Sean?
Oh, no, I'll just apologize for opening up Pandora's box there. I'm in the same boat as you, Chuck. I wasn't trying to propose something specific. I was just trying to, sort of test the objective of what exactly it is that we're voting on next week. I think it makes perfect sense that we want to go forward with some clear direction for how we're going to start. I will say, it does seem like we're going to have to be pretty buttoned down in terms of what fully remote would look like, given that we may on a dime hear from the state, everybody has to go home now. And we're not going to have the luxury of, taking 2 or 3 weeks to figure it out like we did in the spring. So So, I'll just throw that out there that even if we vote and we all approve the hybrid model next week, we're still kind of having to, in parallel, be prepared for going fully remote, because that'll be likely, forced upon us rather than something we choose. So, again, didn't mean to open a Pandora's box there. It's just trying to understand what exactly we would be voting on.
Okay, thank you. Tom?
Thanks, Chuck. John, I do have one question as we've gone through this, the final version. This is not the final version, the fully remote plan here. And looking back at some of the survey information, will we allow families to fully opt into a full remote? I think the answer is yes, but I just wanted to get it clear, even if we're suggesting that the primary model is a hybrid. So if a family has a real high-risk situation and they feel like they need to opt into a full remote, are we allowing that? And if the answer is yes, how will that work from a cohort perspective and who their teacher or teachers are throughout that? And the answer may be we don't know yet, but I just wanted to go through that a little bit, if you wouldn't mind.
I'm going to have you answer all my questions. Yes, we and I forgot to say that at the beginning. I apologize. We are offering a full remote option regardless of the model that we're in. DESE has made it clear that we are required to offer that model, and we do not need to require any medical documentation or anything like that. Because originally that was one of the early recommendations, but then they pulled back on that. To answer your second question, we don't know yet, because I think some of this is going to depend on what teachers, for health reasons, have to opt out remotely, and we may be having those teachers teaching the remote students, assuming that we can make the proper licensure linkages and things like that. So those are all the decisions that are going to happen once we know who's opting out, who can't teach in person, all of those things. I hope that helped.
Is there any other questions? Was that the whole thing, John, or?
Yes, I don't think I have anything more tonight.
Okay, I don't see any other.
I do just have one question. And I know I think I met pretty much with everyone individually, but if you would like to discuss any of this further, please contact me. If there are things you want me to, I've got some guidance from tonight, but if there's anything else you want me to drill down further, please let me know.
Okay. I had a question, and I don't want to put her on the spot, but a question for Gail. Is there any more update on the Birch Meadow modulars that's different than what we already know?
There is no further update. We're still targeting the mid-October date that we were originally.
Okay. Okay, thank you. Okay, thank you, Dr. Doherty. And as others said, we really appreciate the level of detail and work, and by you and everybody on the staff that went into this, and all the communication that you've been doing. And I know it's been a lot,
Thank you.
So the last item on the agenda was just a quick update on the superintendent search process. And Tom and I met with Gail, I guess it was last week, and went through so Gail put together a draft
RFP, and with help from our procurement person, I can't remember the person's name,
Allison
Uh,
Jenkins.
Allison Jenkins, and we met on after and looked at that draft, and some changes were made, and you know, we didn't share that with the committee tonight because I don't want that could potentially mean it got out on the street earlier somewhere. So we really can't share it until it actually becomes something that goes out. So I don't know, Gail, this is very high level. And Gail, if you just want to mention the process at this point.
Sure. Thank you. So what we are going to do, and this was again based on the conversations that Chuck, Tom, and I had, as well as working with the town, is we did pull together the RFP, and we did that taking into account a lot of the comments and feedback that the committee had when we met originally as to what we feel the role would be, what we're looking for an outside consultant to do. Our target right now is to have this go out. I'm working to have it be released on August 5th, which would be next Wednesday, have hopefully a 2-week turnaround time. We're working on whether we feel that would be long enough given that it is summer. Once we get all of the responses in, the selection committee would go through and look at the responses, determine which ones would be viable to bring forth, and then the goal would be to have a subset of them come into school committee and do a presentation, so that school committee would be able to weigh in on the finalists, and then we would bring that back and look at that in connection with the other ratings we had to determine who the finalist would be. So we've spelled out in pretty good detail what it is we would be looking for them to do as part of the process, as well as putting target dates for when we would like to have the search completed and what would be deemed a successful search. So it is a pretty lengthy document that really goes through in very good detail. I think it's about a 12-page RFP listing out qualifications and what we would be looking for them to provide us in order to assess the viability of each firm that would submit a response.
So Gail, once that goes out, we can then get a copy of that to the committee?
Absolutely. I would, as soon as it is released, I will send it directly to the committee as well, and then we can include it in the next packet as well. And again, what we want to do is make sure that when it goes out publicly, everybody has equal access to it, which is part of, it goes on the central register, which is sort of why we're not putting it forth right now, is to make sure when it does go out, it's the avenues that everybody knows to look for it on, to give everyone the equal opportunity to respond to it.
Thank you, Gail. Did anybody have any questions? I know Tom and Carla are having technology issues again. Aaron, Sean, Tom, or John, do you have any questions?
Not at this time for me, Chuck.
Yeah, just one quick question. In this kind of RFP, is this something we post somewhere and all of the firms that are viable would see it and could respond, or do we send it to specific firms? What does that process look like?
So the way it would work is it does get posted on the central registry, which folks know to go out and look for it. We are able to, if we do know there are firms out there that we know would be interested in something, we will be able to let them know this is available out there. If you're interested, please respond. We can't solicit them, but we can make them aware of it.
Okay.
And then we did, based on all of this, it is a request for a proposal, so it will be based upon their ability, not solely based upon price. So we assess them first and then review prices after.
Is it obvious that I didn't understand what you meant when you referenced central registry a minute ago?
It was. I was letting that one slide. John, I was here to work with you.
I appreciate that.
I'm glad you called yourself out, though. That was classic.
Yeah.
But yes, that most people do know about that. It's the way majority of this process works is you post it there and then they know to look for it, but we are able to let them know to go look for it.
Great, thank you.
You're
Okay.
welcome.
Aaron?
Yeah, just a clarifying question about process. 'Cause obviously I'm new to this. So
We all are.
they would come and do some presentations at a school committee meeting. How do we then discuss pros and cons? Do we discuss that publicly after they've left? Do we discuss it in executive session because we don't want them to know what we thought were the pros and cons before we hire them? Like how does that piece of it work?
We can work through that process. There actually will be a rating system that each committee member would be able to complete based upon the presentation. So then it's an objective, subjective process, if you will. So we would then take that information back. This is, just to let folks know, this is one piece of the overall analysis that we would then take back and add it to all of the other ratings we've done based upon their submission, as far as number of clients, how long they've been in business, what their sort of reach is. So this is one piece of it. So it actually would not be a decision made solely based upon their presentations, if that helps, Erin.
Right. So my understanding is then you and Chuck and Tom are
Correct.
the committee that would make that final decision.
Yeah.
Okay.
And then the ratings and all of that could, if people ask for it, that's sort of a different public records request process. But this part would be this one aspect of the RFP that would be rated in the session and then would be brought back.
Okay. Thank you,
Yeah.
guys.
You're welcome.
And I think when it comes back to the committee, that discussion can be done in open session.
Yes.
That doesn't need to be, we're not talking about a personnel matter or something, so it's definitely open session discussion. Is there anything else? Okay, so Tom and Carla are still out, I believe.
Shall I make a motion?
Yes.
You do have a quorum.
Yeah, we have a
Sure,
quorum,
we have a
but
quorum.
there's nothing else on the agenda unless, John, Parks, did you have something?
I just wanted to throw out there a best of luck to Jen Allard.
Oh, yes, thank you.
You know, she's
Thank
been
you.
dedicated with the district for a long time, and she's going to be missed.
Thank you so much. I truly appreciated it. It's so hard, honestly, to leave Reading after 7 years, in various different roles that I've had. So I'm so appreciative for what I've gained here. I'm really excited to keep moving forward in my career, and hopefully some of our paths will cross again.
Thank you, John, and yes, thank you, Jen. So yeah, I had planned on reaching out to you before Friday, so thank you.
Great. Thanks, guys.
Aaron, did you have something?
We've gotten some emails that we haven't addressed.
I thought, okay, thank you. Let me. You want to take the first one? So we got the one on, we read Mary Ann Downing's, we got the one on the school choice from Elizabeth Dalby, which I think we answered.
I answered, yeah.
And then we got the one or two from Christian LaChance. Did you want to read those, Aaron?
Sorry, we also got we got a couple earlier today that weren't addressed. Should we be reading those as well because they weren't in the packet?
What, can you tell me what?
We got one from Mary. Oh no, we addressed that. Let's see, we got one from Amy Ropel at 8:17. We got one from Lisa Norcross at 8:17. We got one from Kim Moreau at 8:53. Michelle Hopkinson, 9:13. I don't think those were addressed.
So we can certainly read them now. I mean, they aren't specific questions. They're advocating for a plan or certain aspects. So I guess that's why I didn't read them, because they weren't specific questions, but we can certainly, you want to read Amy's?
Sure. Hello, school committee members. I am watching tonight's meeting and impressed with the questions and clarity of the proposal. Thank you. I realize what a massive job it is to figure out how to get us back safely. I would like to call attention to the fact that specialist teachers, art, music, phys ed, computer, library, health, will be teaching both cohorts of students at each school. This is scary to me as an art teacher. The plan also calls for specialists to be supervising satellite classrooms as well, in addition to teaching their area. I'm very concerned about this. Having so many adults teach both groups could create cross-contamination between cohorts. Thank you for understanding, Amy Ropel.
John, did you want to read the one from Lisa Norcross? You're on mute.
Sorry, I'm trying to get into email right now. For some reason, it's not letting me log in.
Okay, I can read it. This is from Lisa.
Chuck, is this one, I'm not clear that this one's intended as public comment. I know it came in during the meeting, but.
I don't think any of them were, but.
Yeah, I agree.
Okay.
Sorry, I didn't mean to confuse things. I just was aware we'd gotten messages that we hadn't addressed. But they can go in next week's packet, correct?
Yeah, and I'll send a short note that we got it and thank them for it, and that would go in the packet too. Is that okay?
You know the rules better than I do.
Yes, that's,
Yeah.
and I will certainly take the feedback as we're going through the plan. And
Yeah.
as I said earlier this evening, we're going to continue to work to come up with schedules to minimize their concerns.
Thank you,
No,
John.
I wasn't asking for the rule. I was saying, I just wanted to make sure I was addressing what you wanted to do. So that's all. I guess still no Tom, and I guess just, I got a note that FiOS went down over there.
It's an outage, yeah.
So that's all the agenda items, unless there's anything anyone else wants to discuss, and I'll take a motion.
Motion to adjourn.
Second.
Second, and a roll call. Aaron?
Aye.
Sean?
Aye.
John?
Aye.
Chuck? Aye. And again, thank you to everybody for all the work. So, good night.